Good morning. My name is Josh. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the student pastor here at Highlands, and I've been out for a period of time, coming back to work over the last few weeks because my wife and I, about 2 months ago, adopted a little baby boy named Judah, and thank you. He's just been a joy. Right now, we're learning sleep. And what that is, what days and nights are, and that they don't have to be flipped and all that kind of stuff. So it's been great, and it's been such a joy, but it's good to be back with everybody here and just see everybody this morning. We've been in a series, and that series has been on Easter. So we started the series on Easter Day, and then we kind of expanded it over the last few weeks. But really what we've been exploring is this idea of the immensity of Easter. Like, why is Easter such a big deal? When Easter occurred, when the resurrection happened, what and how did that affect other aspects of our life? If Jesus rose from the dead, what difference does that make for you and I? And how does it impact different areas of our life? And what we've been seeing is that Easter is the death of death. And it's not just the death of physical death, but it's the death of many different things that pop in our life that are kind of these pseudo-deaths, these deaths that kind of bring a lot of angst and problem in our life. And so this week, we're going to see how Easter brought the death of worry. Easter brings the death of worry. Now, when I say the word worry, I don't necessarily mean a diagnosed anxiety or mental health issue that someone may be struggling with. I'm talking more about kind of that general anxiety or that general worry or trouble that all of us experience in life at some point. It's that like ominous thing that we know is coming and we just get really, really kind of nervous about it inside. It's that thing that's outside of our control. It's that thing in the news. It's that person that we know we're gonna have to have that confrontation with that causes and creates within us just like knots in our stomach that just make us kind of like feel a little bit sweaty and kind of clammy and just makes us feel like, man, I don't want to have that conversation, or I don't want to have to experience that thing, or I don't want to have to enter into that situation. That's the kind of worry we want to talk about, that thing that can kind of so take over our life and cause us to maybe even create and shape a life that is different than we planned because of the fear and the worry that we have. Something that's kind of not debilitating, but something that just constantly wraps us up in this shell or in this prism of worry. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And Jesus speaks to this in a specific text in John chapter 14 through 16. So if you have your Bibles, you can open them up there. We're going to be kind of covering these 3 chapters. Now, it's important to know that we are not going to be going line through line with these 3 chapters. I want to make sure everyone gets out to lunch okay, and that we have kids to pick up and all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to be doing today is actually focusing on one verse, and that's verse 27. It was just read not too long ago. From that one verse, what we're going to see is that Jesus is going to take this argument that his peace is the peace that's going to be able to cure worry in our life. And then from there, he has some of these arguments that kind of fit within it. It's almost like it's a tree, and then there's all these roots that come out from it, or there's these veins that kind of come out from verse 27. And he's going to state that in John chapter 14 through 16. If you don't have a Bible, there is a Bible in the seat back in front of you. You can grab that. It's page 958. The large numbers are the chapters, and the small numbers are the verses. So what we see in John chapter 14 through 16 is that it's part of something called the farewell discourse, or the upper room discourse. Jesus has done and completed his ministry. So he went into the world, he had fulfilled the law, he went and he did a bunch of miracles, he saved people, he brought them to life, he revoked demons, he did all this stuff in front of people, and things that we have heard in many different stories in Sunday school, he did those things. And then he marches in to Jerusalem, ready to die. He rides in to Jerusalem, but before he does so, he wants to make sure that he has a conversation with his disciples so that they know and understand what he's doing. In many ways, these are the final words of Jesus. You could think of it in a way of like, if you were to say something to someone that you love because you knew that you were going to die, what were the things, or what would you share? That's what's happening in these verses. Jesus is essentially saying, I need to share the most important thing right now to my disciples before I pass away. And so in John 14 through 16, he kind of shares these statements that almost feel repetitive. Most likely, Jesus sat down for dinner, he ate with his disciples, and then you see at the end of chapter 14, he says, hey, let's get up. And then they begin to go and move to their next destination, and the conversation continues. Or it could be that they were still sitting there, and then he said, hey, let's get up. And like at any dinner party, you sit back down, you continue talking about other things that happened, and then you realize, oh, we meant to leave, but we didn't leave. One of those two things is happening, but Jesus is trying to get across, like, here's the important things. And in summary, here are the important things that he wants to make sure that they understand. And again, these are told all repetitively. He says that he's gonna leave and he's gonna go to the Father. We know that based upon things that he stated before, that his leaving is him dying, him coming back to life, and then literally physically ascending and going back to God, going back to the Lord. And so he's telling his disciples, hey, I'm gonna leave. I'm leaving very soon, so be ready. When he does leave, he mentions that a Holy Spirit, he calls it the Counselor. He mentions it by a few different names here, but they're all the same. The Holy Spirit is going to come and going to help lead you to the Lord, help lead you to the Father. Then he also mentions that when they leave, they should continue to follow his commandments. So all the things that he stated, things that he mentioned in the Gospels that they should do, they should continue in those things so they can find life. And then he mentions at two different points that harsh persecution and rejection are going to come because they follow him. He says, man, there's going to be a time where people are going to hate you simply because you love me. This is going to come. And so he shares all of these things over and over and over again, trying to get them to understand. But in the last chapter of this section, in John chapter 16, the disciples still don't get it. Like, they still don't understand. If you look in John chapter 16, verse 17 through 18, I think this is really funny. Jesus says this, maybe I just have a weird sense of humor, but it says this, then some of his disciples said to one another, again, he's shared this multiple times, what is this thing he's telling us? In a little while you will not see me. Again, in a little while you will see me, and because I am going to the Father. And then they said, what is this he is saying in a little while? We don't know what he's talking about. Jesus has to just be so frustrated. Again, this has been a while. He's been trying to get this across. And then he literally plainly shares with them, here's what you're supposed to do. Here's what's going to happen. And they're like, I don't understand. I'm not really sure what's going on here. It's kind of like, I would liken it to a wife who knows that she's going out of town. She makes sure that all the appointments are set for her husband, for the children, make sure everything's good. Soccer practice is slotted in, and bath times and all that stuff. Everything's good. She makes sure the calendar is good. She's going away on a trip. She packs up her bag. She starts heading out the door. She turns to her husband and says, hey, make sure that you don't forget about soccer tonight. And the husband turns to her and says, our kids play soccer? That's kind of the same thing that's happening in this text, is the disciples just don't get it. And a lot of the reason why they're not getting it is because they're so troubled. They can't get past statements that Jesus will make and things that he's trying to promise them, things that he wants them to know, because they're so troubled. And so in verse 27, Jesus says to them, and again, this is our text for today that we're really going to lean on, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give as the world gives. Don't let your hearts be troubled. And that's a verse that I think is applicable for all of us today. We'll get into how and why and where, but I don't know about you, when I read that, with all the worries that are filling this room, all the different things that you may be bringing in, the burdens that you may be bearing, Jesus not only spoke this to his disciples, but he speaks it to you today as well. May the burden that you're bearing be confronted with the peace of Jesus this morning. So the main idea that I think that Jesus would or not Jesus, but that we would kind of ascertain from Jesus' statement would be this, that where the world earns peace like a temporary commodity, Jesus gives peace as an everlasting presence. Again, this is just the main idea, the main statement. If we had to summarize it, I'm going to say it one more time. Where the world earns peace like a temporary commodity, Jesus gives peace as an everlasting presence. So the way that we're going to construct this sermon today and the way that we're going to see Jesus' kind of logic flow out from it is essentially breaking it down from the end to the beginning. So we're kind of going to go reverse order, where he says, don't let your hearts be troubled, and then we're going to move to the world and then to the peace of Jesus. We're going to see that these things, again, are almost like attached in a way to the other arguments that he's going to make in John 14 through 16. But this is what he wants them to understand, that his peace is different than the world. So let's look at the very first, the statement that we want to focus on, and that is, don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Now, there's many different ways that you could be reading this statement. One way that you could see this statement in a specific light and angle is that Jesus is kind of being a little bit mean, right? Like it feels almost like punitive, if that's the right word. It almost feels like he's like talking down to them in some ways, or he's like angry. He's like so frustrated. And again, maybe he is, and that's totally okay. But he's like commanding them, don't let your hearts be troubled. Like literally, this is in what they would call the imperative. He is saying, don't do it. You're going to let yourself do it. Don't. And it kind of feels mean because they have a lot of reasons to be upset. And you kind of wonder, like, can't they just be upset? Can't you and I, can't we just be a little upset? Like, Jesus, why do you have to be so mean, right? Like, why do you have to be so harsh towards his disciples? In fact, we're going to end up seeing in a few chapters that Jesus himself is going to end up being so worried, so troubled, so filled with angst that as he approaches the cross, he's going to sweat drops of blood. So he even experienced worry. So is he being a hypocrite? What gives? Why is he being so mean about this? I think Jesus commands both you and I, and he's commanding the disciples right now in this moment, because he knows that they're allowing the worries of the world and what they're feeling overwhelmed by, all the different things as they're hearing the things that he's stating, all of that is skewing their view of who he is, what they're supposed to do, and what he accomplished. So he's saying to them, obviously, it's okay to not be okay. You're gonna be troubled. But we don't wanna stay there, because if we stay there, it's gonna ultimately end up skewing our view of everything around us, and you're going to miss the point. That's why he commands it here. It's natural for us in this world at this time to have worries and problems and issues in our life. But don't be so overwhelmed by it that we miss the mark and the point. So what are the disciples so worried about that they're allowing this to cloud their vision? You see Jesus continue his kind of frustration or the point of this in John 14:28, the section that we also read right after verse 27. He says, "You have heard me tell you, I am going away and I am coming to you. If you loved me, you would rejoice that I'm going to the Father, because the Father is greater than I." This is kind of a confusing statement, but Jesus is essentially saying, hey, if you knew what I'm doing, you would be so excited right now. Like if you knew that I lived a perfect life, died on the cross, came back to life, and years from now, there are going to be teenagers who get baptized and come to new life because of that, you'd be freaking out. But because you're so focused on the world and the things that are going on around you, you missed the point. You don't truly love me because you don't truly understand what I am setting out to do. He wants them to get outside of their perspective, because the problem is the expectation of who Jesus is and what he has accomplished is completely skewed and then completely changed by the worries and the fears that they have. See, the disciples thought when they started to follow Jesus, they were called by him and they were brought into a new occupation. A lot of them were like fishermen and tax collectors, and they did different things within their society and culture, but they were given a brand new life in Jesus. Like they had the opportunity to go and do awesome new work. And in fact, they saw Jesus heal people. They did works themselves. They preached the gospel. They did all these like amazing things. And they began to realize, wow, this might actually be the Messiah that's promised from the Old Testament to come now and just free us from the Roman government. And they're thinking, we're on the winning team. Man, we got the king that's going to defeat all other kings. We have the Messiah. Like, in fact, in Luke's account of this particular text, they're arguing about who's going to be greatest in the kingdom of God later on, because they're thinking, man, we made it. We're in the in crowd. We made it. We're on the right team. We're on the right army. We're charging forward. And that's their expectation of who Jesus is. But then Jesus says to them, no, you have it all wrong. In fact, I came to die. I came to suffer. And I'm going to leave. And then you're going to be punished as well. You're going to be persecuted as well. And it shakes the disciples and begins to make them worried and upset, and it stops them from truly seeing who Jesus is and what he came to do. See, in our life, there's so many different things that may pop up. It's not obviously specifically the same as the apostles, but there's so many different things that pop up in our life, from financial issues to job stuff to family stuff. We're worried about our kids falling away. We're worried about cancer and sickness and death and all these different things. Very legitimate worries, problems, and issues. And if we're not careful, we can begin to allow those things in this world to worry us so much that it changes our behavior and even can change our perspective and theology about who Jesus is and what he came to accomplish. We can begin to think, well, man, because I believe in Jesus, I'll be healed from this specific sickness. But you're so worried about the sickness, you're so caught up in it that you begin to change and you begin to think about, man, like Jesus was supposed to do this. He's supposed to help me. Or maybe with our culture, like you think, man, because I'm on the right team, I'm with Jesus, he's on our side, and because we believe these certain things, eventually our nation and our culture will end up conforming to that same way, because we know in the end we win. And so we stop doing different things, or maybe we act a certain way because of that perspective. And Jesus says, no, don't allow this perspective, or don't allow your trouble and worry change the perspective of what you're supposed to be doing now. Live out your faith. Don't allow yourself to be stopping the spread of the gospel because of the fact that you're worried or upset or anxious about the things of this world. Live in such a way that understands what God has come to do, what he is looking to accomplish. The second statement that Jesus states, so he tells them to not be troubled, but he also wants to make sure that not only are they not troubled, but they don't enter into the wrong things that promise peace, but don't actually give it. So Jesus knows that we're prone to essentially enter into different things that could say and seem as if they can offer us peace, but in reality, they don't. And so he says to them, I don't give, and then he's meaning peace, I don't give peace, and this is in verse 27, as the world gives. I don't give peace as the world gives. So don't let your heart be troubled, but also understand and know I don't give peace as the world gives. If we were to summarize what Jesus is trying to say here, is that he knows and understands that the world promises peace as if it's a temporary commodity to be earned or purchased. And that's a trap. Jesus knows that the world will treat peace as if it's this temporary commodity that can be purchased or earned or deserved. And if we fall into the trap of believing that, it ultimately won't bring us peace, but will actually disrupt everything. When you read this statement, I don't give as the world gives, there's kind of two ways that you could look and understand this specific statement. Jesus could be talking about the way that the world gives its peace, right? Like the manner in which it gives its peace. That the world could be giving you peace that is in a manner inappropriate or disruptive. There's also the idea that there's a substance to their peace that's also wrong. So the world could be giving you a peace, and that specific gift, that specific thing, that also is a problem. So both the manner, how the world gives its peace, and the substance, what the gift actually is, or what the peace actually is, are both wrong in the eyes of the Lord. And this is important for us to understand because we need to know and see ways that we could be falling into the ways that the world is calling us and trying to give us peace, and what the world is actually trying to give us. And so what is the substance of the peace of the world? What is this thing that they're trying to give us, that the world is constantly pushing forward to us? And I would argue that it is in our world, specifically in our culture today, a temporary commodity. It's a temporary commodity, something that is here today, gone tomorrow. Something that's almost like a tip or a trick. If you walk into any bookstore and you look to try to find something that's going to ultimately help your anxiety, you're gonna find a book that's gonna give you 15 steps to being able to relieve you of all your worries, right? There's gonna be all these kind of techniques on how to not be worried or anxious anymore. It's gonna give you a way to be able to do it. There's a bunch of promises out in our advertising world that are gonna constantly promise you an image of peace that's gonna show you a happy family or something that you could buy into or believe in to be able to buy their products so that it would give you peace. In 1971, Coca-Cola actually had one of the most infamous ads in television history. The ad was actually pretty simple. It was just a diverse group of people were on a hillside and they sang a song about Coke. And it was one of their best and biggest ads of all time. Here's the lyrics, and for some of you that may know it, it'll get stuck in your head. If you go online to YouTube and you watch it, it definitely will get stuck in your head. It says this: I'd like to buy the world a home and furnish it with love, grow apple trees and honeybees and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company. That's the real thing. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony, and I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company. It's the real thing. What's Coke saying? Buy a Coke, world peace, completed, right? Like if we just all got together and we had a Coke, turtle doves are coming out, there's apple trees growing, honeybees floating by, whatever honeybees do. That's what we are going to experience in our world if you just buy Coke. And this was a huge ad. Like they got 100,000 people writing into their organization about this specific ad. Their sales shot through the roof. Like it was big and huge. And obviously, like we can laugh at that, but in some ways, like there's a small part of us that kind of believes in that, right? Like there's something that's like, man, I think maybe Coke actually will bring world peace. Not really, but it's like, I wonder if the real questions that we have is like, man, if I buy this car and the ad has already told me that I'll have this really, really happy family and I'll look really good and be able to hang out with Matthew McConaughey and I'll be able to do all these things. If I just buy that Nissan Altima, then I'm gonna be fulfilled, right? Maybe that's a bad car to use as an example, but you get the point. Maybe if you use a certain social media application or you buy into Meta, and if you don't know what Meta is, it's essentially like Facebook and Instagram and all the different VR stuff that's new in our world. If I just buy into the social media world and I enter into that, then man, I can find, if you go to their website, they'll promise connection and friends and community and all these awesome, awesome things. But what's the problem with these things? What's the problem with these things that are being advertised to us? The car dies, right? It breaks down and it's causing you more frustration to have to go get it repaired than it was the joy of this picturesque family that you were going to be able to place in it, right? With the social media, with all these things that were offered through Facebook and Instagram and VR and all these different things, the headset comes off, right? The phone battery dies. It only lasts for a minute. It's this temporary commodity that promises you, man, if you buy into this, then you're gonna have peace. But in reality, it's here today, gone tomorrow. We got to get something else to be able to fulfill that for us. So Jesus says, don't enter into it. The world's going to promise you this substance that's not helpful for your soul. But then the other problem with it is the manner in which this is given. And I would say in our world, peace is earned, not given. In our world, you have to be able to earn your peace. Like if you really want to be able to dispel the worries of the world, if you want to be able to be whole, if you want to experience that feeling of just general wholeness, then you need to earn it. Like if you want to be able to have a peaceful, relaxing weekend, what do you got to do? You got to work hard Monday through Friday, right? You got to work for the weekend to be able to get that sense of peace and fulfillment. If you want to be able to be at peace with the way you look and the image that you have, man, you have to buy into certain diet plans and workout regimens and go to the gym and do all these different things. If we want to be able to accomplish and have world peace, we're going to have to ultimately defeat the powers that be, have certain strategies in place. We have to get nations and organizations to be able to all come into unison on different things. There's a certain amount of like, man, we got to earn it to be able to get it. And I'm not saying those things are bad or wrong. We should be probably doing some of those things. World peace would be great if everybody worked together to do it, right? But there's a certain amount of you have to do these things, these steps to follow, these ways that you have to stretch yourself, move yourself, earn it to be able to deserve it. And if you couple together the substance of what the world offers, that man, it's this temporary thing, with the fact that you have to earn this temporary thing, that creates tired, drawn out people. It's why we're so tired. Because we're like hamsters on a wheel. We're like Bugs Bunny chasing after the carrot, right? We're like, I don't know, we're just constantly striving to get that next thing that will ultimately end up giving us peace. And as we're striving for it, we're tiring ourselves out. So Jesus says, stop. I don't give peace like this. There is a substance and a manner in which I'm going to give my peace that is better than the world. So the natural question is, what is the peace of Jesus? Jesus says, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. And he's going to make his argument for his peace all throughout chapters 14 through 16. But if I were to summarize what Jesus' peace is in comparison to the world, is that the peace of Jesus is found in the presence of God given to us through belief in who Christ is and what he accomplished. It's a little bit wordy, so I'm going to state it again. The peace of Jesus is found in the presence of God, given to us through belief in who Christ is and what he accomplished. Notice Jesus says, this is my peace. He's going to give it to us. He's going to leave it with us. So what is the substance? What is this peace that Jesus is going to give to us? If the world's was this temporary commodity, what is Jesus's? What is he trying to give us? The substance of Jesus' peace is God's eternal presence. It's God's eternal presence. That true peace is only found in unity and connection with God. We see in Genesis, this word that is used here by Jesus is the word shalom. And this is a typical greeting for Hebrew people. It's a goodbye and a hello, but it also means an interconnectedness with the world, that there's a certain amount of wholeness in a specific thing or action. That when you heard the word shalom as a Hebrew person, you would think of two kingdoms that are coming together in peace that were once at war. A stone wall that had a bunch of different bricks and is very intricate. Now it's like perfect and good and it looks beautiful. Or maybe a orchestra that plays and all the different parts come together to create this beautiful sound. That's shalom. It's things working together in wholeness and goodness. And when Jesus says, my peace I give to you, he's saying, my shalom I give to you. My shalom I give to you. So what's Jesus' shalom? If you see in Genesis chapter 1, the world is created and it is said to be very good by the Lord, that God creates all these different things, that the Holy Spirit is involved in it, and then ultimately he creates and shapes the world, and it is very good. It has shalom. Everything was perfect and peaceful. There's no worry in the world. He creates it and he forms it. Every single day, Adam and Eve wake up in perfect peace with God, man, and creation. And from this, we see essentially that wherever God resides, wherever his presence is, there's peace. There's no war, there's no corruption, there's no death, there's no fighting, there's no tension, there's peace. It's just where he is, there's peace. And throughout the rest of history and all over the Old Testament, we see that there's temples and there's tabernacles that are created where God dwells with people. And in those specific places, in that tabernacle, in that area, there is peace. There is shalom. The same shalom and peace from the garden in Genesis chapter 1 is there and present in those places. Why? Because God's presence dwells there. And then we see with Jesus, God becomes man. He dwells on the earth. He's in the world and in the earth. He lives the life like we have lived. And in Jesus, because God's presence dwells within Jesus, there is shalom. There's perfect peace in Jesus. We see that ultimately, the same peace that we find in Genesis chapter 1, where there's no war, no fighting, everything is good, everything is okay. That same peace is found within the character of Jesus, and Jesus eventually says that through his Holy Spirit, it will ultimately be placed within believers who begin to believe in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. It's the presence of God. It's everything that we see in Genesis chapter 1. The presence of God is so much better than anything else that the world can offer. It's so much better. Like, if you think about it, let's say you have a kid or a friend, for whatever reason, that's really, really afraid of the boogeyman in their room. So let's pretend like you're a parent, okay? This is probably a better way to approach this illustration. Let's pretend you're a parent and your child comes out of the room and they say, I'm afraid of the boogeyman in my closet, okay? They're super, super scared. They're all worked up. They're very, very anxious, and they're very, very worried. And they don't know if they can go back to sleep. So you know I need to make them at peace. What are you not going to do? You're not going to get down on one knee and say, hey, so what you're going to want to do is immediately punch the boogeyman in the throat. Because if you punch him in the throat, he's going to be stunned, and then you can put him in a sleeper hold, and then from there you can choke him out, and then the boogeyman's gone, right? Here's all these techniques to be able to make sure the boogeyman is actually gone. He's removed from your life, right? What's the kid gonna do? Probably get even more scared of you in that moment than even the boogeyman in the room, right? They're just gonna be like super quizzical and like, what is going on? But if the father or whatever parent enters into the room with the kid, the presence of the father is going to immediately dispel any amount of fear. That's what they actually want. That's what they actually need. They don't need technique. They don't need all these different weird things that you could give them to be able to get rid of the fear. They just want their parent. They just want their dad. What we see is when Jesus gives us the presence of God, he's giving us the Father. Jesus says it all over chapters 14 through 16. We get God to walk through life with us in every problem and trial. And that's why it dispels our worry, because the God of the universe who shaped and formed the world is aware and can acknowledge every single hair on our head, that knows the very brain synapses that are firing right now in this room, or even understands the cosmos and all the universe. That God is going to walk into rooms of worry with you. That's why this is important. The presence of God follows us. That's what is given to us in shalom, and that we see, then trust and understand when he says in John 14:18 that he hasn't left us as orphans, or that his Spirit will guide us in 16:13, or that he even listens to us in 16:23. That's why it's so comforting, because the God of the universe is present with you. So then how is it given to us? How are we given this peace? Now, we ultimately know that the world isn't as it once was in Genesis chapter 1. Then in Genesis 3, if you look at your Bible, you see in Genesis 3, Adam and Eve ultimately end up disobeying. They go their own way. And because of that, all of these things that bring worry and tension and strife and death, all of that enters into the world and creates this division between God and man, so that we're not able to experience shalom. We're not able to experience peace with God in the way that we needed to before. So how does God ultimately end up creating a way for us to be able to experience peace and shalom? He ends up sending his son. And Isaiah actually says that he will bring the Prince of Peace to help us. So he sends his son. He sends Jesus. Jesus lives the life that you and I should have lived to be able to experience peace with the Father. He dies on the cross for our sins. He dies the death that we deserved to be able to get back to where we needed to go. And he ends up ultimately coming back to life and gives that new life through his Spirit to people in this world. And how do we get it? Is it through earning it? Is it through deserving it? Is it because we're really, really cool? Is it because we do a lot of religious things? Is it because of our family? Is it because of our background? No. It's because of what Jesus accomplished and did in this world. And it's not earned like the world would want to say. It's given to us like a gift. That's why Jesus says in John 14:1 and all throughout this text, believe. Believe in me. He's not saying, you got to earn this thing to be able to be a part of it. He says, believe. And then ultimately he says, you want to stay with me? Remain. You don't have to do, you don't have to work, you don't have to strive, just be with me. And we see that belief is simply us just stating, hey, I believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and I'm willing to follow his commands, just like we see in John 14:25, that we're gonna follow his commands because we love him. So that means we don't have to work anymore for peace. We just gotta believe in the presence of God is made available to us through what Jesus did, and we're willing to stake our entire life on that, which means we don't have to continue to tire ourselves out to run that hamster wheel to be able to receive peace. We just have to be like branches on a vine, as he says in John chapter 15. Branches just grow out of a vine, right? I'm not a plant guy, but I'm gonna guess that that's what happens. Branches just grow out of a vine. There's never a moment where branches are like, well, I'm gonna try really, really hard to grow out of this vine, or I'm gonna be the prettiest branch to be able to grow out of this vine. No, it simply is. And Jesus says, you want to experience peace? Stop trying. Stop running. Stop. Be with me, as he says in John 15. So what does this peace look like? If we have the peace of Jesus in our life, if the presence of God has come into our life, we've bought into that, now we believe in him, we're not striving anymore, we're with him, he's in us, just as he says in John chapter 14, that the Spirit is within us, and we now are experiencing that, and we are now going and knowing that Jesus is one with the Father, all of that. We have the peace. What does it look like in our life? Is it an elimination of all problems in life? Is Jesus gonna come down and eliminate all of your debt? Is Jesus gonna come down and get rid of all the problems that you may have with your coworkers? Is Jesus gonna come down and ultimately fix world peace right now, here and now? There is one day where all of those things we see in Revelation will go away. But in the here and now, he's not saying, hey, you're not gonna experience any problems. He's not telling his disciples, he's not telling us now, hey, it's gonna be all great and amazing. If you believe in me, that means any prayer that you state and say, you're gonna end up receiving in my name. We see that there is a certain amount of fortitude and strength that is given to us through God's peace to withstand the things of life, not the elimination of all the different worries of life. And I know this because Jesus says after his statement in John 14, he says in John 15:11, he says, I've told you these things so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. And he says right after that, in the context of looking at maybe hatred or suffering or persecution we may experience. He says in verses 12 through 14, "This is my command, love one another as I have loved you." So what do we see? The person that has the peace of God is able to withstand joy despite difficulty and love in spite of hatred. The person of peace is able to walk through this world understanding and knowing that God has conquered all, that they know who he is and they have his presence, and so they can take joy despite everything else falling down around us. We are able to have joy that Jesus is who he says he is, and he's accomplished what he's going to accomplish, and one day he's going to end up coming back to renew all things. And so we don't have to be afraid or nervous because we know what's going to happen. We have joy despite suffering. We can also have a love despite the hatred that surrounds us. Jesus constantly is warning his disciples, you're gonna be hated, but love those that hate you. We can have a love that's able to look past the things in this world, the people that slander us, the people that gossip about us, the people that put us down, and we're able to experience the presence of God and share that peace in the world. It's almost as if we're so filled with that shalom from Genesis chapter 1, that God's Spirit is so filling us that it pours out and spills out to the world around us, that we can have joy despite things that are going on in our world, that we can love people even when they hate us, and we feel right to be able to do so. We essentially become conduits of Genesis 1 peace to the world around us. And who does that sound like? It sounds like Jesus, who's about to die, but he's the one comforting the disciples, who's about to go to the cross for people that hate him and still loves them. What we'll see is that the presence of God will begin to conform and shape and move you, and there is nothing that you can do to be able to get out of that presence and only ask to believe and remain and sit in the presence of God. You may have so many worries in this world, burdens that you feel like are unbearable. The good news is we have a God that has conquered all, and we can be with him. Let me leave you with this last verse. In John 16:33, Jesus says this is the only way that I could summarize that. He says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world. Be courageous. I have conquered the world." We are one with the conquering king. And so despite the worries that may pop in our life, we can trust that he is there. Let me pray for us and we'll finish out this morning. God, we pray for your peace right now. We pray that for those that are experiencing extreme difficulty, burdens that seem unbearable, that seem overwhelming and immense. God, I pray that today your presence is felt more tangibly, more real than ever before. That you bring the peace of the garden into our lives, that you share your Spirit with us. May we be comforted, knowing that you have defeated death, and that we now have your presence eternally with us for the rest of our life. In your name we pray, amen. Would you stand as we sing out this morning?